What if I told you that the most important thing Lewis Hamilton did in 2025 was not getting on the podium, not even winning careers, but something other pilot on the grill was able to do with his team? Stay, because today I am going to show you the hidden side of the technical advance that Hamilton led from within Ferrari, long before anyone noticed it. The most impressive thing is that all this happened in silence. While the media talked about their lack of rhythm, of their alleged frustration, Hamilton was sitting in meetings with department leaders, redesigning development protocols, proposing new metrics to evaluate the aerodynamic response of the SF-25 and correcting even the decision-making criteria in the race. That failure that everyone saw was actually a transition. A pilot who was not colliding with Ferrari culture, but was challenging her. And he did it from the inside, with data, with experience, with authority. From the first glance to SF-25 during the preseason, it was clear that Ferrari had opted for an aggressive design philosophy. Maranello's great technical commitment was to adopt a pull-rod front suspension architecture, a solution that had given excellent results to McLaren and Red Bull in previous seasons. This radical change from Ferrari's traditional approach was not only aesthetic or symbolic. It represented a complete turn in how the team conceived aerodynamic balance, mass distribution, and interaction between chassis and suspension. The potential was there. But that potential, like so many times in Ferrari's history, came with a price. The main technical problem that dragged the SF-25 in the first 2025 races was its extreme dependence on an extremely narrow soil height window. In simple words, the car only worked well when it was extremely close to the asphalt. This is ideal under the rules of soil effect, because a more efficient suction is generated that maximizes aerodynamic load without the need for giant ailerons. But at the same time, it made it vulnerable to any irregularity of the circuit, to the pianos at the wear of the lower part of the car. And the consequence was brutal. In Shanghai, Hamilton was disqualified by the excessive wear of the car wood table. This incident was not a simple infraction. It was a technical and operational inflection point for Ferrari, because it forced the team to raise the height of the car in posterior races to avoid another sanction. That emergency solution destroyed the aerodynamic balance of the SF-25. Uploading the car meant losing the soil effect, and with it, the great competitive advantage that Ferrari had planned to build. This technical dilemma ran under and fast at risk of sanction, or high and legal but slow became the central puzzle of the equipment. And it was there that Hamilton became indispensable. With his experience, he understood that it was not enough to correct a single variable. The problem was not just the height. It was the complete set of decisions that the car demanded around that design. In Mercedes, Hamilton had developed a very precise sensitivity with the motor brakes, especially useful to balance the car in braking without depending so much on the hydraulic system. In Ferrari, that braking firm was completely different. The SF-25 did not allow the same modulation, which deeply affected its style. A passage through aggressive curve, based on deep braking and rapid direction changes. The car was resisted. The pedal responded differently. The transfer of weights did not accompany. What for other pilots was a detail, for Hamilton it was a structural crack. Moreover, the front pull rod suspension that Ferrari premiered with such pride, although it offered a more precise curve entry, it also made the car much more nervous in technical sections. He did not forgive mistakes. The optimal behavior window was small. And when he left it by tire temperature, load level, or track conditions, the car not only lost pace, it became unpredictable. Hamilton, aware of this, initiated a joint work with the engineers of the simulator to redesign the balance of the car from the Fire simulator. They modified key parameters: rigidity of the suspension, vertical load curves, shock absorber recovery times, all with the objective of softening the car response in borderline situations. And not only worked in the technical, he also adjusted his own piloting. 4 years, he had perfected a style based on controlled aggressiveness, braking late and releasing the steering wheel with millimeter precision. But now I had to learn again. He studied Charles Leclerc's style, especially his soft transition between accelerator and brake, his minimal speed management, and began to incorporate it into his repertoire. In Australia, signs had already been seen. In China, that transition had deepened. But the most notable point of this evolution was not just how Hamilton adapted to SF-25. It was how he forced the car and the team to also adapt to him. His work was not just with track engineers. It was directly involved with data correlation managers, with aerodynamic designers, even with those responsible for telemetry and tire degradation analysis. At that time, before arriving in Singapore, the SF-25 was not yet a dominant car. But it was no longer the uncontrollable monster of the beginning. The power was still there and finally began to channel. Ferrari, thanks to Hamilton, was not only developing a better car. I was learning to understand it. Before the Singapore Grand Prix arrived at the calendar, something fundamental had changed within Ferrari. It was not a great aerodynamic update or a revolutionary component that transformed SF-25 from one weekend to another. The real change was deeper, more invisible, and more powerful, a change of technical mentality. This new approach did not emerge spontaneously. It was the accumulated product of silent work that Lewis Hamilton had been promoting since his arrival. The British pilot had not only delivered critical documents that radiographed the structural problems of the team, but had initiated a cultural transformation that began to bear fruit weeks before reaching Marina Bay. Unlike previous years, Ferrari began working with projection. What was previously a reactive approach to adjust what did not work after each race became a proactive roadmap, where the team anticipated problems, validated solutions, and refined their concepts before having to apply them under pressure. This involved changing daily practices, more extensive simulator reviews, direct data integration between departments that did not communicate fluently, and a total review of the correlation strategies between track and wind tunnel. Hamilton was key in all this. In the weeks prior to Singapore, it became the axis of the advanced SF-25 configuration work. He led specific sessions to emphasize the car height management depending on each type of street circuit curve, where each suspension millimeter could mean the difference between stability and chaos. He proposed new rate combinations, suspension rigidity, motor mapping, and brake distribution, validated in simulator and then executed on track during private test sessions. He even managed to involve technicians from different areas that traditionally did not collaborate directly, such as telemetry software managers and career strategy specialists. In parallel, key adjustments were made in the behavior of the SF-25 differential, one of the least visible but more decisive elements in the traction of the car in slow curves, something vital in a circuit like Singapore. The way in which the car managed the weight transfer and braking was also redefined, a point that had been critical for Hamilton during its first races. Ferrari worked in a new motor mapping to adapt the regenerative braking (MGUK) in Hamilton's driving style, allowing him to recover part of that sensitivity he had had for years in Mercedes. And here's something even more revealing happened. The technical feedback that Hamilton provided began to have measurable effects. In internal simulations, the SF-25 no longer showed the inconsistencies that had characterized him in the first major awards. The relationship between what was projected in the simulator and what was observed on the track improved substantially. Ferrari began to trust his own car. And that, in Maranello, is a rarity. Thus, when the calendar pointed towards Singapore, Hamilton did not arrive as the disoriented pilot of Australia. He arrived as the architect of a silent transformation. The SF-25, without having changed radically in its pieces, was now a more consistent, more understandable, more complete car. While public opinion talked about its adaptation, its age, if it was a mistake to have left Mercedes, Hamilton was already designing the future. Not only his, but that of Ferrari. A future in which each technical decision is not taken as a reaction to the previous disaster, but as part of an intelligent, anticipated, and built process on experience. A future where the car is not simply fast but predictable, and where the pilot not only reacts but leads. In that sense, Hamilton is not only rewriting his story as a pilot, he is rewriting what a pilot means in Formula One modern, because its value is no longer only in what it does with your hands on the steering wheel, but in what it contributes with the mind and experience. How it influences the processes, the culture of the team, in the way Ferrari faces the greatest technical challenge in its recent history, ceasing to be a promise and finally become a winning structure. And that transformation, even if it does not shine yet in the trophies, has already begun. Not because someone says it, but because the symptoms are there. A car that improves, a team that is ordered, an address that is clarified. And at the center of all that, Hamilton. Not as a symbol, but as a real engine of change. What elements of the SF-25 indicated as critics? Subscribe, activate notifications, and leave your opinion in the comments. Do you think without Hamilton, Ferrari would have been able to start this change?